It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Welcome to Boone and Crockett's Heritage of the Hunt.
Welcome to Boone and Crockett Club's Heritage of the Hunt. We've got a great crew to hear today because we are very excited to announce that as of today, the Boone and Crockett Club is now accepting records for Javelina, collared peccary. And we've got the crew of individuals who are integral in having that get started. So thank you all for being here today. We've got Kyle Lehr, Director of Big Game Records for Boone and Crockett Club. We've got Nicole Tatman, who is the Big Game Program Manager for New Mexico Game and Fish. Jim Heffelfinger, who is the Wildlife Science Coordinator for Arizona Game and Fish Department. And we've got Emilio Espino, who is the co-owner of La Pelosa down in Coahuila, Mexico. And the cool part is everybody here is also members, regular professional members of the Boone and Crockett Club. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being on our podcast.
Hi, Jodi.
Great to be here.
Hello. So Kyle, I'm going to start with you because you are the keeper of the category, if you will. Want to give us a little bit of a background on how the process for creating a new category is, and then we can get into, as we go into the discussion, about how the agencies and the individuals here kind of petitioned to have this as a new category. And then we can talk about what it means, how the scoring process is going to go, what the minimums are, all those crazy things people want to know.
Yeah, thanks, Jodi. So to create a new category for Boone and Crockett Club, it's actually outlined step by step in our official measures manual. There's 5 different, let's see what it says here, conditions that have to be met in order for a proposed category to come into play. As far as I know, it's been Javelina specifically has been one that's been floated around for years. And I'd say within the last, correct me if I'm wrong, about a year and a half ago, the group here submitted a proposal. And so at that point, my job as the director is to take that proposal and distribute it to our records committee for their consideration. Like I said, it took about a year and a half of discussions amongst the committee, and ultimately they decided that all the agencies that manage this species consider it big game. There's tags issued. They're in good number. There's boundaries, and the scientific evidence supported the creation of this category. So the committee felt that all 5 of those conditions were met in the proposal, and unanimously decided to create the Javelina, the game records category.
And it's a big deal. The last category that was created was actually just separating and creating a non-typical category for Columbia and Sitka black-tailed deer. And that was done 23 years ago. But the last time a species was added as a category was when tule elk were added. And that was in 1998. So we're talking nearly 3 decades. So it's really a big deal. And that makes a total of 39 categories. Am I right about that?
Correct. Yeah.
So it's a big deal. And it is. It's not that it's that difficult a process, but there are conditions in it, and to come up with an opportunity to identify a species that has that, the mystique of a hunt, the opportunity to have a record class animal is a big deal. And Jim, Nicole, Emilio, you guys were core in doing this. And in fact, I'm going to nod over there to Jim because you and I have known each other a long time. And I remember when this came about, you told me that you've kept a folder for, 2 decades, something like that, with the idea of wanting to promote getting Javelina as a category. Why? Tell me what happened and where that came from.
Because they're so cool, obviously. I mean, this is exciting because Javelina are really neat animals. They're native North American ungulates. They're hooved animals. And this is going to give them the respect that they've deserved for a long time. I was the first 23 years of my career, I managed Javelina in southeastern Arizona, which has a lot of Javelina down there. And early in my career, I became a professional member of Boone and Crockett Club, was friends with Buck Buckner. I was talking to Buck, who was vice president of North American Records at the time. And I said, why do we not have a javelina category? It makes no sense to me. It's another hooved native North American mammal walking around that we manage sustainably. All the agencies do. And Buck didn't really have a good answer. He said, we've talked about it, but it just never gained any momentum. And I started talking to some other people in the club, and there just wasn't a lot of excitement. It wasn't a lot of momentum. I was early in my career, raising 4 boys, busy. So I had this file that I started because I was determined to make a new Boone and Crockett record category for javelina, and just put it on the back burner. I just filed it, didn't have a lot of momentum, and I was busy with a million other things. So I put it in the folder. And then about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, Nicole emailed me and said, would you provide a letter of support from your agency to support establishing a new category for javelina? And I said, a letter? I said, I'll clear my calendar. Let's get to work on this. I'm really excited about this. And with her on the records committee and reinvigorating all this, I was pretty excited about rolling up my sleeves and jumping in and making it happen.
So, Jim, you had that vision for a long, long time, but Nicole, it sounds like you were the instigator. Why? What was the motivation to try to move this forward?
Well, I got to give a little credit to Texas here because I think they tried maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and they had reached out to me and I think Arizona and asked for a letter of support for a similar, I guess, proposal. But I'm not sure what happened there, and it just didn't get anywhere. And most recently, about a year and a half ago, javelina are just interesting, right? Like as far as big game species goes, we don't know quite as much about them. They're not maybe as cool looking as an elk, but you actually spend time out in the field looking at them and they're really interesting, right? Like
Amazing.
they do some silly things, like they're just fun to observe.
Yeah. No, they're pretty neat. And in fact, actually, when my daughter got a bow recently, I was told, oh, the first big game animal you should really pursue is a javelina because the hunt is a challenge. They're cagey, they're a little wild and different, but it also gives a great opportunity to observe them in a very unique habitat type. You know, they're obviously so what I read is that peccaries evolved moving up from the Americas, the South America, Central America, and into Mexico. And this was thousands of years ago that the collared peccary became pretty endemic into Mexico and up. So in some ways, they're more of an old Mexico and a Central American species that moved in there. You've got them on the ranch. Why did you get involved in this process?
Well, we actually don't have them at our ranch, but they're all over in State, or in other parts of Coahuila State, Chihuahua, Sonora. We have them in a wide range. I got involved through Nicole and Jim's initiative because I think it's a noble cause. Javelina, like Jim pointed out, don't get the respect of the hunting community as I think they should get. I think what this initiative is going to do, it's going to create value. It's going to make hunters appreciate them more and be a little bit more selective. Down here in Mexico, I think the hunting community will change its mindset and start taking better care of them, taking to their quotas, not over harvesting, not feeding them. In some cases, I'm generalizing, but in some cases, seeing it as a play. I think this is going to benefit the species. It's going to benefit the hunting community and overall the picture for hunting.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I know in some cases there's people. I've heard both sides. When we released the announcement of the new category, it got a lot of interest, a tremendous amount of interest across a wide range of media and outdoor writers who have written about it, and a lot of interest for sure. But I've also heard some people say, they're just pests. They're just a problem. And one of the hopes for this is to create that value, that interest, that opportunity to have a new animal that may have a chance to get into the book and create that excitement and enthusiasm for 'em. Jim, Nicole, give me a little bit more about the species themselves and what makes them different and unique. Jim, you want to start?
Yeah,
Since you had the
sure.
Bible, you had the binder.
Also, I do. I do want to mention right at the beginning here that we don't have our Texas contingent here, but to give credit, David Brimminger and Alan Kane and Froilan Hernandez from Texas Parks and Wildlife were part of this team, and an important part of this team in putting this together. So I want to mention that, so they get credit for that. But
yeah, no, we had limited squares we could put on a thing here. Unfortunately, maybe we'll have to circle back with them and learn more about the Texas side of things down the road here.
Yeah, well, one of the necessary items for a record category, and adding Javelina, is the fact that they're professionally managed by professionals. They're managed sustainably, and all of the agencies in the U.S. and in Mexico in UMAs collect survey information on these animals. They collect harvest information. They track harvest, and Arizona Game and Fish has recognized the Javelina as a big game animal since 1929. And Texas and New Mexico in the 1930s, recognizing them as one of our native animals that we're managing. So a long history of professional management, which is one of the prerequisites of a category. We don't just add animals to a records category just because we can harvest them somewhere, but they've got to be sustainably managed to make sure that harvest is appropriate.
Yeah. Nicole, what do you think about some of the unique characteristics of Javelina, the collared peccary, that are going to be important or important for hunters to know about that may not have hunted them before?
I think like one of the more interesting things about them is they don't really have great eyesight, and I think that makes them a really interesting animal to pursue with a bow, as you mentioned earlier, Jodi. Like bow hunters, I've in my chair as a big game program manager for Game and Fish, I've heard a lot more interest from hunters coming up over the years of hunting Javelina. Like people want to come to the Southwest to hunt this unique big game animal that they can't hunt elsewhere. Excuse me. And so I think that's a really cool opportunity that we have. And I guess I wanted to circle back and sort of just highlight one of the more powerful things that happens with a category and Boone and Crockett recognition is that people are kind of drawn to that animal or drawn to that landscape. So somebody that's never been to New Mexico or set foot in Arizona or Texas might value that landscape that Javelina are now on a little bit more than they would before. So I think that's a pretty key aspect as a wildlife manager in an agency that I really value as far as a new category goes. But yeah.
No, I think that's very true. It is, I mean, it is a very unique southwestern desert landscape that they are endemic to, and that is certainly an area that is in need of focus or allure or something that is going to draw, and having the category and having that draw. I know we were in Arizona, southern Arizona, Mearns quail hunting, and the same deal. You don't have an appreciation for that landscape until you have something that is really unique for you to pursue, and to be out in that brush and that scrub, and that landscape is certainly a challenged landscape in terms of losing habitat or wanting to make sure that there's some kind of care and respect for that. Emilio, in Mexico, generally, or Javelina, I think I remember you talking about adding value. Is this something that you think is going to be interesting for somebody to either Mexican hunters or people coming across the border to want to hunt and pursue them in Mexico as well, not just the U.S. states?
Yeah, 100%. I believe being recognized as a record book animal will create value. Probably at the beginning, with Americans crossing the border to come hunt down here, and that eventually will permeate into Mexican countries. Usually, we follow what American hunters do. So I think immediate or short term, that change will come with the Americans coming down here, but then it will generate much more interest by Mexican hunters as well.
Excellent. All right. Any other thoughts about the critters themselves before I turn it over to Kyle to talk about some of the details of the category?
Yeah, I would say make sure that people aren't confusing Javelina with feral hogs. There's so much talk about feral hogs being invasive and destructive and bad for the habitat. They're not native animals. Javelina exist in a lower density. they have 2 young each time, and not a litter of 10 or 12 like feral hogs. Feral hogs only have 2 litters a year. Javelina are reproducing once a year and only 2 individuals. So they're not anything like feral hogs, and they're not. You would think finding a herd of black pigs on the hillside in this wide open desert Southwest would be easy, but it's not. It's far from easy. They're not black pigs as much as they might look like it close up. They're gray, and they're the same exact color as the gray boulders and the gray mesquite, and they're very, very difficult to find in a spot and stalk and glassing. But popularity for hunting javelina has really gone up strongly in all 3 states. All 3 states, we pulled together the data from just the 3 states, not including Mexico, and found 58,000 people hunting javelina every year and harvesting around 33,000 individuals. So this is not just some little side thing that a few people do. This is a major big game animal in North America that not only are a lot of people interested in, but an increasing interest in Mexico and all 3 states right now. So it's a great time to add this to the record books.
For sure. And I think that's a very key point, that that they're not the same family as pigs. It is an entirely different, it's the Peccary family. It is not, maybe I know we call Peccary. Is the family name Peccary, or is it still Peccary as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well,
Teasuidae is the family. A regular pig is Suidae, the pig family, and these are Teasuidae. They're closely related, obviously. I mean, it looks like a pig, smells like a pig, but they are a different family. They've got different number of toes. They've got different glands. They've got all kinds of real physical differences.
for sure. For sure. Yeah. All right, Kyle. So we've got a new category, and as of today, we are accepting entries. What does that mean? I mean, you had to reach out to the official measures, and Pope and Young, and we should acknowledge that as well, that Pope and Young is also accepting categories for archery, take, and javelina as well. We have different minimums, so that's kind of the first thing that has to be set. What is the Boone and Crockett minimum?
Well, I'm gonna hold off on that a little bit, but so once we got the proposal from the group, took it to the records committee. You know, they discussed and deliberated, and once they approved the category, then the work began of, okay, well, how are we going to measure these, and what are our minimum entries scores going to be? Luckily, there was a fair amount of data from Arizona, Texas, a little bit from New Mexico. Unfortunately, Mexico, we didn't really have much to go off, but luckily we did have some parameters already created from the state scoring agencies in Arizona, Texas, and New Mexico. So once the committee approved the creation of Javelina, then the work began of, how are we going to measure these in the scores? And we leaned pretty heavily on some of these state scoring organizations and how they do it. There is probably the biggest difference is going to be from how Arizona measures them. They don't include the incisors. And the committee discussed this pretty heavily on whether or not to include them or not include them. And eventually they settled on we would include them, similar to cats and bears. And we're going to measure them like we would cats and bears. The one big thing with javelina is the back of their skull, and the scientists can probably speak more eloquently to this than I can, but the back of the skull has a Y shape. And so traditionally with bears, especially, you can use calipers. And we realized pretty early on that calipers would not be an effective tool to measure the length of javelina. And so we're going to recommend that we use what we call a ball square. We call it a ball square because it's what we use to measure the balses on muskox. But it's essentially 2 stair jigs. And I apologize, I don't have one with me. I should have grabbed one. But it's 2 square jigs that basically create that. And so that allows you to, measure the length and account for that Y on the back. So that's going to be the biggest difference we see. And then the width is how we, measured widths on everything. So it'll be a length and a width measurement. The committee decided to measure it in 16ths to follow the other state scoring organizations. And then what you've all been waiting for. So when we tried to decide how we were going to do the minimum entry scores, the same group essentially came and presented the data, and there was actually some pretty remarkable, I would say, I don't know if plateaus is the right word, Nicole, but there were pretty distinct breaks in the data that showed essentially a record book javelina. And so you kind of have to balance a score that's going to generate entries and reward a mature javelina. And so the committee looked at all that data and came to the determination that there was a pretty distinct break at 14 and 5/16, which would generate.
I feel like there should have been a drum roll and like big lights flash.
Fireworks? Is there a
yeah, like say that again.
Yeah, 14 and 5/16. I don't know if there's a background that could be fireworks.
Yeah, we should have got like back those
little champagne poppers I could have. But there was a pretty distinct break at 14 and 5. Also, historically, Boone and Crockett's minimums are higher than the state minimums. So, like I said, it was a balancing act that the committee discussed, pretty heavily and more than one meeting. So, and it's the same minimum for the awards are all time. And so the reason we did that is we wanted to see how many entries that number would draw. And there are other categories where we only have one minimum. And essentially the all-time minimum is to help reduce the size of the all-time book, essentially. And so they went with 14 and 5 because they thought that, in the future, if we're seeing a ton of entries at 14 and 5, they could institute an all-time minimum, which wouldn't kick anyone out of the records. Anyone that was at 14 and 5 or above would still be recorded, would still be available to, Nicole and Jim and other agencies if they wanted to use our data. But the committee decided that for the time being, they'd stick with just the one minimum.
Well, and I think if I remember correctly, when you guys were evaluating both the scoring systems in the states, you wanted to also make sure that there wasn't an appreciable difference in size in, say, Texas versus Arizona, right? That was something I'm seeing you nodding, Jim. We wanted to make sure that when you set a minimum, it's appropriate that anybody in any one of those states would have an opportunity to shoot a record book animal, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, that was the other thing, we had to see, was there an appreciable difference between javelina in Texas or Arizona or New Mexico? That's just, that's what we had the data on. And so that was the other factor that we took in.
Absolutely. You mentioned data going back to the states. Nicole, Jim, Boone and Crockett Club scoring information. We've talked about this in other podcasts. It's a data set that runs back, for existing categories for an extended period of time. I mean, almost 100 years now in some of the book categories. And it creates an opportunity to mark success and conservation, where if you do it right, you're going to have bigger animals on the landscape over time, and that gets noted through increased entries at higher minimums of the animals. I mean, you're reaching to get a new state record or a new world's record even. It becomes more of a challenge, but there are opportunities if things are going well on the landscape. How do you guys in the agencies utilize some of that data for how you manage or how you look at your big game tags or your programs that you do in your states?
Yes, I would say that, for New Mexico, we have like a license, a couple different javelina licenses that lump a lot of game management units together. And so one of the big values that I could see in this is that, we don't know often where those animals are harvested, but Boone and Crockett does ask for a county. And so for me, I'm hearing anecdotally and with photographs that people are showing me that javelina are showing up in more areas, more northern, further north than we would expect them. But I think to quantify that is harder. But Boone and Crockett and a new category is actually doing that, right? And so that is a valuable piece of information that I can then use to, make a better management recommendation on an expansion of an area for hunting, for example, or increased number of licenses if an area is getting more and more entries into the book. And I guess I'd be interested in what Jim has to say too.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of the original reason for the any kind of record book categories like this is to document these big game animals, and having this long-term data set is not going to allow us to determine how many permits we need in a certain unit or not. Bigger scale, bigger than that. I've been a co-author on a couple peer-reviewed scientific papers where we use the entire Boone and Crockett database to look at trends in animal quality and animal size in different areas and relate that to all kinds of environmental factors. And one of them was a giant manuscript that was a monograph that won Wildlife Society's Publication of the Year award. And so there's not only us, but there's other people using these data for learning a lot more about these animals and their relationship with the environment. And there's no other data set like this. And the 3 states, as Kyle mentioned, the 3 states had some records on the books. New Mexico with SCI, and Arizona's had its own record book since 1970. And so with Arizona, and then Texas also has Texas Big Game Records. They started in 2010. With those 3 states, we have about 1,000 javelina that are already in state or SCI record books. And so then Boone and Crockett then could use all of that data and look at those. And like you said, we can look for geographic differences, which there wasn't any, so we don't need any subcategories. But also, even with Arizona that had the most record book animals and did not include the teeth, the teeth stick out only about an 1/8 or a 16th. So the javelina, the front teeth are here and the skull is right there. So there's very little difference in those. So we can't take
And
the
here's where I'm
Arizona.
going to suggest to people who are only listening to go to our
That's right.
YouTube or watch the video, because Jim does have a javelina skull, and he did show the Y that's at the top. That's part of the measuring. So we do have this as a video as well.
I do that too. I consume my podcast with audio only, and then sometimes I got to run to YouTube and fast forward to that spot so I can see whatever those people are talking.
Totally.
Yeah. So I apologize for that, yeah, but it does illustrate that. And so we can't take the Arizona records and just fold them into Boone and Crockett because it's a different measurement. But the fact that the javelina teeth are consistently an 1/8 or a 16th more or farther out than the skull still allow the record book committee to look at all those records, and you could subtract an 1/8 and a 16th and know pretty well what the distribution of those sizes were to arrive at a very data-based, data supported minimum score.
Very cool. All right, Kyle. So the application, you could submit an entry, and the key thing is that any animal that was taken that meets that minimum previously. So if you have a skull that would meet that minimum, it does have to get scored by an official measurer, though, right? So a Boone and Crockett official measurer, and you have created a video, and you've also reached out to official measurers about how that scoring process is going to go. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like, and how you've reached out to the OMs, and whether those in the states there are going to be ready for the inundation, the rush of javelina scoring that's going to come in?
Yeah. So I invited Justin Spring, who's the executive director of Pope and Young, over, and we did a quick video just to let our OMs know the slight differences that I went over about the Y in the back and using a boss square or 2 levels. And we will begin accepting them. Our requirements still have to be met for entry. It will have to be measured by a Boone and Crockett Club official measure. And for Arizona in particular, those will all have to be remeasured because, as Jim pointed out, the incisors were not included in those length measurements. So those will have to be remeasured. So have to be measured by a Boone and Crockett Club official measure. You can find Boone, the nearest one. We have an official locator map where you can search by state, drill down, and find the general area where our official measurers are. they should have all the entry requirements, the paperwork that's needed, and they can help you through that process.
Very cool. Well, this is a big deal. It's kind of cool to be part of history because, again, it's almost 30 years since it's happened, since this new species was added to the record book. So congratulations to all of you guys for a process that took a year and a half or so to get finalized. Or if you go back to Jim's history of keeping information in a folder, we're talking 20 plus years for the effort or the vision of having it go. So congratulations on that. Kyle, I'm going to give you an opportunity to close out. Is there any other points from a process perspective from Boone and Crockett for entry that we didn't get to talk about or you want to emphasize more again?
Yeah, so the big thing for our official measures will be we currently don't have the ability to accept entries digitally with Javelina. So the official measures will have to either print out a score chart online, which you'll see by going to, search score chart PDFs on our website. You can find all our score charts there, all our current paperwork, or, we can mail you a paper score chart. So once we work with our developers to get that into the system, we'll let you know. But currently, we're going to have to go back to the old paper way of doing things for the score charts and everything. But yeah, hopefully we get a ton of entries with this, and looking forward to having Javelina as a big game category.
For sure.
Like you said, it's pretty exciting. I mean,
It is.
Almost 30 years.
Yeah, and I do want to also add, you commented about the basic requirements for Boone and Crockett record book, and I don't want to undermine or forget to mention the fair chase affidavit. That is another absolutely essential part of being part of the record book, is that that these animals need to be taken in fair chase. It needs to be that they need to be able to certify that was the case. And I think for all of us who've talked about this category and the species in general, that's the key part of the conservation message, and what honoring the animals by creating a category and creating this record book class opportunity, that's a key part of that, right?
Yeah. The entry affidavit still needs to be submitted. As you mentioned, animal still needs to have been taken in fair chase. There's 9 conditions on our entry affidavit that still have to be met for an entry.
Yep, very good. Okay, now I'm going to go around the horn with some last thoughts. Anything we didn't cover? Emilio, I'm going to start with you because I know this is personal. This is a big deal for you, and you have a lot of love and respect for wanting to create a category in order to add value to those animals and add a more excitement and enthusiasm. So anything that you wanted to say, any wrap-up thoughts?
No, I think you guys pretty much covered everything. The only thing I would add is that here in Mexico, we don't have much information about Javelina. So if Nicole thinks this is going to be valuable in New Mexico, Jim thinks this is going to be valuable in Arizona, I can't imagine it not being any less. I think it's going to be even more helpful for us because we don't have any state records. We don't have any kind of information. So this potentially can be huge for us. So Boone and Crockett, people forget it's a North American organization, which Mexico is a part of. So by creating this category, we're helping put eyes into a somewhat overlooked region.
No, I think that's a very, very, very important point to make too. Nicole, how about you? Do you have any closing thoughts? Any last fun story about a javelina or anything like that you want to tell? Anything we didn't cover?
I would just congratulate the Boone and Crockett Club itself. I mean, like the records book categories were established to recognize the biggest and most magnificent animals and wildlife management and conservation successes, right? And so that's exactly what this new category is doing. So I just guess I want to extend the congratulations to the club itself and all of its members.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole, for being part of that process. All right, Jim, Mr. 20 years of notes. You
Yeah, and
wrap it up.
33 years of pursuing javelina. So I've been hunting javelina every single year for 33 years. And like Nicole said, when you sit on the hillside day after day and you're glassing for javelina and you're trying to find javelina and you're finding them and you're watching the little herds interact, you're watching them root up little forbs, you're watching them just tear right into prickly pear cactus, thorns and all, and shred that out there. And you just spend a lot of time pursuing the animals. You gain such a respect for them. They're such a neat little native desert animal, and I'm just so glad that they joined the club, so to speak.
Good way to phrase that. All right, Kyle, any last things on your end? You're good?
Jen and I are ready. Bring on the javelina entries.
Outstanding. Well, thank you guys all for taking the time to walk us through a little bit about the critters themselves, the process that it means to create a new category. Kyle for the big reveal of the minimum entry requirements, which is a big deal, obviously. We're excited to see how this goes, and I hope that the hunting community embraces this the way it's meant to. That they value that, increases that love affair with the desert and these quirky little buggers that run around, and it'll give you the slip any chance they can, just like some of our other more typically pursued animals in the Southwest. So everyone, thank you so much. We appreciate all of your engagement with the Boone and Crockett Club, all that you do in your state agencies and down in Mexico as well, Emilio. Kyle, good luck. I hope we get this like rush of papers coming in here in the next couple of weeks, and excited to see how this all goes. So until next time, this is Jodi Stemler. Thank you guys for being on Boone and Crockett Club's Heritage of the Hunt.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.